April 15, 1943. 25,000 feet above occupied Belgium. The sun burns white against the thin blue air. Frost crystals glint on the cockpit glass of Captain Werner Schreyer's Focke-Wulf 190 as he levels out with his formation. Below them, the shadow of war stretches across the land. Black scars of bombed villages and smoking rail lines. Above, the contrails of American bombers snake westward like pale ribbons. Schreyer's radio crackles. Acting. Fighters climbing. 12 o'clock, low. Squints down. What he sees almost makes him laugh out loud. They aren't Messerschmitts. They aren't Spitfires there. Barrels. Huge, blunt-nosed aircraft lumbering upward through the haze, sunlight flashing off their round engines. The American P-47 Thunderbolt. The newest fighter in the sky, the Americans are flying beer kegs. He jokes over the radio, his wingman chuckling back. From above, the Thunderbolts look absurd. Short wings, fat fuselages, and a cockpit perched like a bubble on top. Nothing about them, says fighter. Everything about them, says mistake. Sure, Banks left, eager for the kill. The Luftwaffe still owns the European sky in 1943. The Focke-Wulf 190 is the king of fighters. Sleek, deadly, and perfectly balanced. The Germans have spent 4 years mastering the art of air combat. The Americans, by comparison, are newcomers. And these newcomers seem to have brought flying milk bottles to a gunfight. But as the Thunderbolts climb closer, something feels different. Their engines. Pratt & Whitney are 2 800s. Amid a deep rolling thunder, not the sharp mechanical whine Schur expects. The sound vibrates through his cockpit glass. The lead American fighter banks slightly, and for a moment, the sun catches the glint of 8 dark tubes beneath its wings. Machine guns. Schur rolls over, nose down. Let's show them how real fighters fly. His squad dives. The Thunderbolts brace. In seconds, the sky erupts. Tracers slicing through the cold morning air. Engines screaming as German and American steel collide at 400 miles per hour. For a brief instant, the Americans seem clumsy, their planes sluggish to turn. But then the roar changes. A Thunderbolt dives, engines howling, and suddenly the air fills with a sound like tearing canvas. 8 synchronized .50 caliber Brownings unleashing hell. Each sends a stream of 30mm slugs downrange. 100 bullets every second. A wall of lead. Schur watches in disbelief as one of his squadron mates' FW-190s disintegrates midair, wings shearing off under the impact. There is no fire, no smoke. Used an explosion of fragments. It's over in less than a second. Mein Gott, he whispers. What is that thing? The laughter dies in the radios. The flying barrels keep climbing. Back in the United States, 3,000 miles away, a short, determined man named Alexander Kartveli sits in his office at Republic Aviation in Farmingdale, New York. His desk is buried in blueprints, coffee stains, and cigarette smoke. 3 years earlier, the U.S. Army Air Corps had given him an impossible order: build a high-altitude fighter, capable of escorting bombers deep into Europe. One that can fight at 30,000 feet, where engines gasp for oxygen. Most designers would have tried to make something small and elegant. Kartveli didn't. He decided to build a machine of brute strength. The prototype weighed over 7 tons. It was so heavy that some test pilots refused to fly it. It couldn't outturn a Spitfire. And it climbed slower than a 109, but it had something no other plane possessed. A massive turbo-supercharged radial engine that didn't care how thin the air was. The P-47 could keep its full power even above 30,000 feet. And it could take punishment that would shred a lesser fighter. Kartveli called it Juggernaut. The pilots would later shorten that to Jug. By April 1943, those flying barrels are crossing the channel for their first real combat missions. Bomber escorts and fighter sweeps over occupied Europe. Most Luftwaffe pilots dismiss them as clumsy giants. They don't know yet that inside those giants hide 8 hungry .50 caliber guns. 10 rounds total, enough ammunition for half a minute of continuous fire, Half a minute is an eternity in aerial combat. As the battle over Belgium rages, Captain Werner Schröer pulls back on his stick, searching for altitude. His radio is chaos, shouts, screams, static. He spots another Thunderbolt diving below, chasing a Focke-Wulf that's desperately twisting to shake it. The German pilot breaks left. The American follows, nose steady. Then 8 flashes in half a heartbeat. The German plane simply vanishes into a cloud of debris. Schröer swallows hard. The laughter, the arrogance. Gone within 6 months, those same Luftwaffe aces will speak of the P-47 in hushed tones. By autumn, they'll give it a name in their own language, Donnerschlag, thunderclap. Because when the thunderbolts fire, the heavens themselves seem to shake. The Americans have brought a new kind of warfare to the sky. Not elegant duels, but industrial destruction. And the laughter of the Luftwaffe is over. The Flying Tank. Design and Devastation. April 1943, back in the United States, Republic Aviation's factories are humming with relentless energy. Inside, men and women work side by side, assembling the P-47 Thunderbolt piece by piece. The massive radial engines are lifted with cranes. Wings are bolted onto fuselages. Every Thunderbolt is meticulously inspected. Because the war in Europe is unforgiving, every plane that leaves the factory must survive. The P-47 isn't just another fighter. It is a flying tank. 7 tons of raw metal and firepower. Its massive Pratt & Whitney or 2800 double wasp engine produces 2,000 horsepower. Enough to propel the juggernaut through 30,000 feet of thin, icy air while German fighters struggle to breathe. Most engineers would have focused on maneuverability. But Kartveli had a different philosophy, survival and firepower above all. Inside the cockpit, there's room to breathe. Tall pilots who feel cramped in Spitfires or 109s can stretch their legs. There's room for equipment, maps, and radios. For long missions, 6 hours or more, this was more than comfort. It was a lifeline. And pilots quickly realized the P-47 could take punishment that would destroy any other fighter. Its robust airframe, thick armor plating, and self-sealing fuel tanks make it nearly invincible too. German 20mm and 30mm cannons, but the real terror lies beneath the wings. 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, each loaded with 425 rounds. 3,400 rounds in total. Enough to fire 30 seconds of continuous death. The Americans didn't just throw bullets into the sky. They tested, calibrated, and perfected their firepower. Large paper targets were set behind enemy lines. P-47 pilots flew over at night firing, then spies retrieved the targets. Every trajectory calculated. Every bullet aimed to converge in a deadly 6-foot-wide corridor 300 yards ahead. The perfect distance for maximum destruction. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a young American pilot, would learn this lesson the hard way on June 26, 1943. German fighters ambushed his Thunderbolt over the European countryside. His plane took more than 200 bullet hits. Hydraulic systems destroyed. Canopy jammed. Armor shredded. Yet the P-47 kept flying. Johnson's aircraft, riddled with holes, remained in control. A miracle of engineering. The German pilot, stunned, reportedly saluted and flew away. He had met something he had never imagined. A fighter that could take a beating and keep coming, back over the European skies. Luftwaffe pilots begin whispering about this flying tank. The initial ridicule has faded. By late 1943, they've learned the hard truth. Never try to outturn a P-47 at low altitude. Never try to outclimb it above 20,000 feet. Instead, the Americans exploit the Thunderbolt's supercharged engine. Climb high, 30,000 feet, then dive. Nothing can catch the P-47 in a high-speed dive. It reaches nearly 500 miles per hour, fast enough to match even early jet fighters. Pilots also discover a dangerous quirk if they push the throttle too quickly. The propeller tips risk breaking the sound barrier. Shockwaves could tear the blades apart. Mastering the engine required gradual power increases, another skill that separated expert pilots from the novices. By January 1944, the P-47 receives a new paddle blade propeller, increasing climb rate by 40%. Suddenly, the Juggernaut can match German fighters in vertical climbs. The deafening roar of its propeller earns a terrifying nickname among the Luftwaffe, Donnerschlag, thunderclap. Ground crews joke that you could hide a jeep behind a single propeller blade. No exaggeration. Each blade is over 6 feet long, more than a foot wide at the base, and weighs more than some World War I fighters. The Thunderbolt isn't just air superiority, it's versatility incarnate. As P-51 Mustangs take over bomber escort duties, the P-47 switches to ground attack missions. Carrying 2,500 pounds of bombs, plus rockets that strike like artillery shells, 8.50 cal guns make short work of truck convoys, armored vehicles, and supply trains. Pilots perfect skip bombing, bouncing bombs off roads, rivers, or bridges to destroy hidden targets. Locals driving along highways during training were often caught in white clouds of flour from practice runs. A bizarre taste of war. And it isn't just German pilots who fear the P-47. The mental effect on troops is profound. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's staff reports that soldiers panic at the sound of thunderbolts overhead. Doctors note Jabot fever, a real psychological and physical reaction to incoming fighter bombers. Just the roar of a P-47 sends infantry diving for cover. The production numbers tell the real story. 15,683 P-47s built. More than any other U.S. fighter, factories run 24/7, assembling one plane every hour. Many workers are women, the legendary Rosie the Riveters, some of whom had never seen a plane before Pearl Harbor. They could build these complex machines faster than German. Factories could replace even simple fighters. By early 1945, the Luftwaffe's attitude has shifted completely. Major Joseph Priller, who mocked the P-47 in 1943 as a pregnant cow, gives an interview stating, "The Thunderbolt is the perfect fighter bomber. Those 8 guns never jam, never overheat, never run out of bullets." We laughed in 1943. Now nobody laughs. The thunder of the Juggernaut doesn't just dominate air combat. It crushes morale. Every German pilot lost is replaced by trained Americans, while the Luftwaffe sends inexperienced pilots, often with fewer than 100 hours of flight time, into battle against veterans with 400-plus hours of combat experience. The war in the air begins to tilt decisively. From mockery to nightmare. The P-47 in combat? April 15, 1943. 25,000 feet above occupied Belgium. Captain Werner Schroer, veteran ace of Jagdgeschwader, 26. Peers through the thin cockpit glass of his Focke-Wulf 190. The sky is crisp, the sun reflecting off the clouds below. Suddenly, in the distance, he spots them. American fighters climbing toward his formation. At first glance, he can't help but laugh. These planes, fat, stubby, and utterly ungainly, seem to defy everything Schroer knows about fighter design. Bubble canopies perched on barrel-like fuselages, stubby wings that barely seem able to lift them. It's almost cartoonish. They're flying barrels. He radios to his wingman, suppressing a grin. How could these lumbering machines challenge the mighty Luftwaffe? The pilots of the FW-190 are battle-hardened veterans. The Americans, fresh from training, should be easy prey. Yet, by mid-1943, German pilots would learn a terrifying truth. 8.50 caliber machine guns, each loaded with 425 rounds, would unleash 3,400 bullets in 30 seconds. The P-47 wasn't built to dance elegantly in dogfights. It was built to kill, and survive while doing it. Lieutenant Robert Johnson's Thunderbolt, riddled with over 200 bullet holes yet still controllable, would become legend. Stories spread rapidly through the Luftwaffe. Planes that should have fallen remained airborne. Engines burned, hydraulic systems destroyed, but the Juggernaut endured. The first encounters revealed a grim reality. German fighters could no longer rely on turning and climbing tactics at low altitudes. The P-47's turbo-supercharged engine gave it an unmatched advantage at high altitude. Climb to 30,000 feet, dive at near 500 miles per hour, and nothing could intercept it. Even the new jet fighters couldn't match the Thunderbolt's speed in a dive. Pilots had to learn precision flying. Too abrupt on the throttle, and the propeller tips risked catastrophic failure. By October 8, 1943, one of Germany's most skilled aces, Lieutenant Hans Philipp, met his end. At 28,000 feet, his engines labored in thin air, while P-47s dove on his formation. Robert Johnson's combat report was succinct. Saw hits along the body of the plane. Aircraft exploded. No parachute. Shock reverberated through German squadrons. If Philipp, with over 500 missions, couldn't survive, who could? By early 1944, the P-47 received its four-bladed paddle propeller, increasing climb rate by 40% and producing a roaring sound that terrified enemies. Ground crews marveled at its size, each propeller blade over 6 feet long, heavier than some entire fighters from World War I. Its presence on the battlefield was both physical and psychological. Troops and pilots alike developed jabot fever, a visceral fear of approaching thunderbolts. But air combat was only half the story. The P-47 excelled in ground attack missions, capable of carrying 2,500 pounds of bombs, plus rockets. It turned convoys, tanks, and railway transports into burning wreckage. Pilots perfected skip bombing, bouncing bombs off surfaces to destroy hidden enemy positions. An innovative tactic that terrified troops and disrupted supply lines. Even Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's staff weren't safe. P-47s strafed command vehicles, leaving lasting psychological impact. Meanwhile, American factories churned out P-47s at a staggering pace. 15,683 units built, one plane per hour around the clock. Women, the legendary Rosie the Riveters, worked tirelessly, often without prior experience. The scale of production overwhelmed German capacity. The Luftwaffe could not replace losses fast enough. Every P-47 shot down would be replaced within days. While German pilots were sent into combat as inexperienced replacements. By the war's end in 1945, the change was dramatic. Major Joseph Priller, once mocking the P-47 as a pregnant cow, admitted, "The Thunderbolt is the perfect fighter bomber." We laughed in 1943. Nobody laughs now. The juggernaut had transformed from ridicule into legend, turning air superiority into industrial-level destruction. The 8.50 caliber machine guns didn't just destroy aircraft. They shattered morale, decimated supply lines, and left an indelible mark on the Luftwaffe. The P-47 Thunderbolt story is one of American ingenuity, endurance, and overwhelming firepower. From the clouds above Belgium to the factories of Indiana, it became a symbol of mass production, technological dominance, and relentless survival. German pilots who laughed at its barrel-shaped fuselage learned a harsh lesson in the sky. The Thunderbolt's thunder spoke louder than ridicule ever could. The Thunderbolt's reign, air and ground domination. By 1944, the P-47 Thunderbolt was no longer just a fighter. It had become a fearsome weapon of total war. Pilots learned to exploit every advantage the aircraft offered. High-altitude diving attacks became standard tactics. From 30,000 feet, Thunderbolts could reach almost 500 miles per hour, making them impossible to catch. German pilots, once masters of the sky, now had to fly defensively. Retreating from formations that previously would have feared nothing, Lieutenant Robert Johnson, whose plane had survived over 200 hits, became a symbol of the P-47's resilience. Other pilots began to trust the aircraft implicitly. Even severely damaged Thunderbolts could return to base with holes in wings and fuselage, missing engine cylinders or jammed controls. The aircraft's strong construction and clever engineering saved countless lives. It wasn't just a plane. It was a flying tank with wings. The psychological impact extended to the ground war. P-47s with rocket pods and bomb loads could destroy convoys, trains, and tanks in minutes. Supply lines melted under the relentless thunder of 8.50 caliber guns. Pilots practiced skip bombing to hit troops hiding under bridges or behind obstacles. The local populations often watched in awe and terror as Thunderbolts carved white flower bombs in training exercises. A practice that foreshadowed destruction on a massive scale during combat missions. German troops and commanders experienced Jabbo fever, a unique terror triggered by the sound of approaching thunderbolts. Entire units would panic or retreat simply at the roar of the engine and the thundering propeller. Even top Luftwaffe officers admitted that hearing the distinctive Donnerschlag, the thunderclap of the P-47, would make them reconsider engagement. Meanwhile, the production machine behind the P-47 was unprecedented. Factories operated 24/7, delivering one aircraft every hour. In Indiana, a team of women workers, the iconic Rosie the Riveters, once assembled a full P-47 in just 18 hours. Each plane was a marvel of engineering, combining a 2,000 horsepower Pratt and Whitney engine, turbo superchargers, water methanol emergency power, and 8 synchronized machine guns. German pilots couldn't compete. Even their advanced FW-190s and Messerschmitts were inferior when facing these relentless American machines. By 1945, the war had shifted irreversibly. Air combat statistics revealed the scale of the Thunderbolt's dominance: 3,752. Enemy aircraft destroyed in air combat: 3,315 on the ground, 9,000 locomotives, 86,000 railway cars, 6,000 armored vehicles, and 68,000 trucks. Air superiority wasn't just tactical anymore. It had become strategic annihilation, driven by the P-47's power, resilience, and sheer numbers. Even German veterans, once derisive, openly admitted their misjudgment. General Adolf Galland, former head of Luftwaffe fighters, recalled flying a captured P-47 after the war. The power was unbelievable. But what struck me most was that America built thousands of these complex machines faster than we could build simple fighters. Every German pilot lost was permanent. Every American P-47 destroyed would be replaced within days. This industrial edge turned mockery into an overwhelming strategic advantage. The Thunderbolt's legacy wasn't just in numbers. It was in its impact on morale, tactics, and engineering philosophy. From being laughed at as a fat, clumsy plane in 1943, the P-47 became the most feared aircraft in the German skies by 1945. Pilots preferred crash landing rather than bailing out, trusting the aircraft's durability to protect them. Tall pilots loved its roomy cockpit. It's the only place in the war where one could stretch legs on long missions. The story of the P-47 Thunderbolt is a tale of innovation, persistence, and adaptability. Its 8.50 caliber guns didn't just fire bullets, they fired a message. Ridicule can turn into fear. Domination. An unstoppable power in the hands of those who understand both the machine and the sky. It rules. By May 1945, the war was over, but the legend of the Thunderbolt had only just begun. The plane that German pilots once mocked had reshaped the battlefield, proving that sometimes bigger really is better, and that firepower, endurance, in mass production could outweigh skill, elegance, and tradition. From fighter to ground attack, the Thunderbolt evolves. As the war progressed into 1944, the role of the P-47 Thunderbolt shifted dramatically. No longer confined to air-to-air combat, the aircraft became a devastating fighter bomber. Combining the firepower of its 8.50 caliber, machine guns with bombs and rockets that could obliterate enemy ground targets, pilots discovered the full destructive potential of this flying tank when attacking supply convoys, armored vehicles, and railway infrastructure. A single Thunderbolt could turn a well-defended road into burning wreckage in minutes, its presence alone forcing entire German units to disperse or retreat. Training adapted to this new role. Pilots practiced skip bombing, bouncing bombs off the ground or water to strike hidden targets. During exercises, roads across America would be covered in white flower bombs, startling locals but perfecting the technique for precision strikes. Ground crews became experts in armament and loadout, transforming the P-47 into a precision weapon of war, equally feared in the air and on the battlefield below. The psychological effect on German troops was profound. Witnessing the thunderous roar of the massive four-bladed propeller, over 6 feet long per blade, became a symbol of imminent destruction. Soldiers developed Jabot fever, a unique terror triggered solely by the sound of approaching thunderbolts. Even experienced commanders admitted that an air attack by the P-47 could paralyze a unit without a single shot fired, demonstrating that fear itself could be weaponized. Meanwhile, American production continued at an unprecedented pace. Republic aviation factories churned out thousands of Thunderbolts, ensuring that losses were quickly replaced. Factory teams, many led by women, could assemble an entire aircraft in a matter of hours. This industrial might, combined with superior pilot training, meant the Luftwaffe was outnumbered, outgunned, and outpaced. While German planes were advanced, they could not match the combination of durability, firepower, and sheer numbers of the P-47S. By early 1945, the Thunderbolt's multi-role capabilities were fully realized. Pilots who had once been rookies were now seasoned veterans, executing high-altitude dives, strafing runs, and coordinated ground attacks with deadly precision. They relied on the plane's robust armor and engine resilience, knowing that even after heavy damage, the aircraft could often return to base. Stories of Thunderbolts landing with massive holes in their wings or missing engine cylinders became legendary among crews, cementing the P-47's reputation as nearly indestructible. The final tally spoke volumes. P-47s destroyed thousands of German planes, locomotives, tanks, and trucks, contributing not just to air superiority, but to the strategic collapse of German supply lines. The combination of relentless firepower, mass production, and tactical innovation made the Thunderbolt a symbol of American ingenuity and determination. By the end of the war, transformation was complete. German pilots who had once mocked the P-47 as a pregnant cow now feared it as the dominant force in the skies. The plane's impact was felt in every theater where it flew, redefining air combat strategy, pilot confidence, and battlefield psychology. From ridicule to terror, the Thunderbolt had proven that raw power and resilience could redefine an entire war. The legend endured long after the last P-47 rolled off the production line in October 1945. Only a handful of these aircraft still fly today, but the echo of their guns and engines reminds us of a war where engineering, strategy, and sheer courage converged to turn the tide in favor of the Allies. The psychological impact. Fear in the Luftwaffe. For German pilots, the P-47 was no longer just an enemy aircraft. It had become a nightmare in the sky. Veteran pilots like Lieutenant Hans Philipp, who had survived hundreds of missions, could not withstand the onslaught of Thunderbolts at high altitude. The Americans had discovered the perfect formula: climb above the German formations, unleash the full power of the turbocharged Pratt and Whitney engine, then dive with unmatched speed and precision. German fighters, superior in turning and maneuverability at low altitude, suddenly became vulnerable prey. Robert Johnson's combat reports from 1943 and 1944 illustrate the brutal efficiency of these machines. German fighters would explode in midair, torn apart by 8 synchronized .50 caliber machine guns. Pilots were forced to realize that firepower and resilience could triumph over agility. Even the most confident German aces were haunted by the realization that every P-47 shot down would soon be replaced, while each lost Luftwaffe pilot represented an irreplaceable blow to morale and experience. The psychological warfare extended beyond the cockpit. Ground troops experienced Jabot fever, a real physiological reaction triggered by the Thunderbolt's approach. Entire units would flee in panic at the sound of its propeller before a single bullet or bomb struck. High-ranking officers like Field Marshal Erwin Rommel were personally affected, reportedly wounded when P-47s attacked his staff car in July 1944. The presence of Thunderbolts undermined confidence and accelerated the collapse of German resistance on multiple fronts. This fear was compounded by the plane's overwhelming durability. German pilots could inflict damage, but the Thunderbolt would often continue flying despite extensive hits, landing safely even with engine cylinders missing or wings riddled with holes. Witnessing this resilience firsthand forced German pilots to reevaluate every engagement, understanding that a single victory against a Thunderbolt rarely guaranteed success or survival. As the war approached its final year, the psychological edge the Americans had gained was irrevocable. The Thunderbolt was not just a machine. It was a symbol of technological superiority and American industrial might. Where German engineers had focused on precision and elegance, the Americans leveraged durability, mass production, and raw firepower to create a weapon that could endure punishment and deliver devastation in return. The transformation of attitudes among these formations perhaps best summarized by Major Joseph Priller, who had once mocked the plane in 1943. By 1945, he acknowledged in a post-war interview that the Thunderbolt was the perfect fighter bomber. The 8 guns never jammed, never overheated, and provided a lethal wall of lead that could destroy German planes and infrastructure with unmatched efficiency. From ridicule to terror, the Thunderbolt had rewritten the rules of air combat. Mass production and industrial might. The American advantage. By 1944, it became painfully clear to the Luftwaffe that the P-47 was more than a superior aircraft. It was a testament to American industrial power. Republic Aviation had produced 15,683 Thunderbolts, more than any other American fighter. Factories ran 24/7, completing one aircraft every hour, with workers often never having seen a plane before Pearl Harbor. These women, proudly called Rosie the Riveters, learned to assemble the complex machines faster than German factories could build simpler fighters. One Indiana factory even set a record, a complete P-47 assembled in just 18 hours. Meanwhile, Germany struggled to replace pilots and planes. Young recruits with minimal training were thrown into combat against veterans with hundreds of hours of flying experience. The difference in experience and industrial capacity created a growing imbalance in the skies. Each P-47 shot down would be replaced within days, while every lost German pilot was irreplaceable. The numbers alone were terrifying. The Luftwaffe could not match the relentless stream of American fighters and bombers. The P-47's role evolved as well. While it had started as a high-altitude fighter, its durability and firepower made it ideal for ground attack missions. Equipped with 2,500 pounds of bombs and rockets, it could destroy tanks, trucks, trains, and supply columns in seconds. Pilots developed tactics like skip bombing, bouncing bombs off the ground to hit hidden targets with surgical precision. Thunderbolts became mobile artillery, striking fear not only in the Luftwaffe, but also in German ground forces. Even experienced German pilots found themselves overwhelmed by the combination of firepower, speed, and resilience. Witnessing a P-47 take hundreds of bullet hits and still fly challenged every assumption about what a fighter could endure. The Thunderbolt was engineered not just to fight, but to survive, allowing pilots to return to base and fight another day. By early 1945, the transformation was complete. Pilots who had once laughed at the fat American cow now understood they were facing an indestructible aerial machine. The 8.50 caliber guns had turned mockery into terror, and the sheer scale of production and tactical ingenuity ensured that American air power dominated the skies. The P-47 was no longer a plane. It was a legend of World War II. Psychological warfare. Fear in the Luftwaffe. By mid-1944, psychological impact of the P-47 on German pilots and troops had reached its peak. The thundering roar of its massive paddle blade propellers, each blade over 6 feet long, was instantly recognizable. German pilots called it Donnerschlag, or thunderclap, because the sound alone could freeze enemy aviators in their cockpits. Facing a formation of Thunderbolts, even seasoned aces hesitated, knowing the devastating firepower they carried on the ground. Soldiers and commanders alike developed jabot fever, or fighter-bomber fever. This was real physical and mental stress, a combination of fear and adrenaline. Triggered simply by hearing the approach of P-47 South, convoys scattered, artillery units went silent, and supply columns halted, waiting for the inevitable strike. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel himself reportedly suffered casualties from Thunderbolt attacks on his staff vehicles. The plane was not only a weapon of war, it was a tool of terror. In the air, the P-47's reputation was growing even faster. German pilots adapted tactics, trying to exploit their plane's superior agility. But by now, American pilots knew how to counter every move. Climb to 30,000 feet, dive on the enemy. Unleash all 8.50 caliber guns, then pull away before retaliation. These dive-and-strike tactics, combined with engine reliability and armor, made the Thunderbolt nearly unstoppable. Even when badly damaged, the P-47 could return to base. Entire cylinders could be shot away, hydraulic lines severed, control cables barely hanging on. Yet pilots walked away. This indestructibility made German pilots paranoid and desperate, unsure if any engagement could succeed. The P-47 had become a machine that punished mistakes ruthlessly and rewarded. Courage was survival. The psychological warfare wasn't accidental. American engineers and tacticians had designed the plane with durability, firepower, and reliability in mind, knowing that psychological impact could be as important as bullets. By the fall of 1944, German Air Command recognized a brutal reality. The P-47 wasn't just winning battles, it was crushing morale. The turning tide. Thunder in the skies of Europe. By the beginning of 1945, the skies over Europe no longer belonged to the Luftwaffe. They belonged to the Thunderbolt, once mocked as a flying milk bottle. The Republic P-47 had become the most feared aircraft in the Western Front. Entire German formations avoided combat when radar screens showed incoming American groups marked by the distinctive high-frequency roar of their engines. Major Joseph Priller, the same pilot who had laughed at the Thunderbolt 2 years earlier, now called it the perfect fighter bomber, he admitted. Those 8 guns never jam, never overheat, and never run out of bullets in normal combat. We laughed in 1943. Nobody laughs now. Statistics told the story better than words ever could, in air combat alone. P-47s destroyed 3,752 German aircraft. Another 3,315 were wiped out on the ground. They obliterated 9,000 locomotives, 86,000 railway cars, 6,000 armored vehicles, and 68,000 trucks. The kill ratio stood at more than 4-to-1 in favor of American pilots. An unprecedented level of dominance, but beyond numbers. It was the symbolism that mattered. Each new Thunderbolt, rolling off the assembly line, represented the industrial might of a democracy at total war. Each mission flown by American pilots showed that mass production, training, and engineering excellence could outmatch the precision craftsmanship and pride of the Luftwaffe's elite. Even German aces like Adolf Galland, who once commanded all fighter forces, later confessed after the war, "We saw this big heavy fighter and laughed. We said Americans don't understand air combat. We were completely wrong." When Galland flew a captured Thunderbolt in 1946, he understood the truth. The P-47 wasn't designed to dance. It was designed to dominate, from the frozen skies of the Ardennes to the bombed cities of the Ruhr. The deep metallic thunder of the P-47's 8 guns became the soundtrack of Allied supremacy. The thunder that remained, the legacy of the Thunderbolt. When the war ended in May 1945, the engines finally fell silent. But the echo of the Thunderbolt still lingered. The last P-47s rolled off the assembly lines in October 1945. More than 15,600 had been built. More than any other American fighter of the war. In the factories of Republic Aviation, thousands worked day and night. Many of them women who would later be known as Rosie the Riveters. Armed with rivet guns and welding torches, they built at an incredible pace the machines that flew across every front, One plant in Indiana even set a record. A complete P-47 built in just 18 hours. This kind of industrial power was something Germany could never match. While American factories worked around the clock, German industry fought merely to survive beneath a rain of bombs. Every P-47 that was shot down was replaced within days. But every fallen German pilot was lost forever. Many veterans later said they hadn't just flown the Thunderbolt. They had trusted it. It brought them home, even when it was burning. Even when it was half destroyed, pilots told stories of emergency landings with entire cylinders ripped from the engine, with control cables hanging by a single thread, and still they lived. The Thunderbolt was not beautiful, but it was indestructible. After the war, the P-47 served in air forces around the world. In France, Brazil, Mexico, and Turkey, it became a symbol of American engineering, a reminder that strength often matters more than elegance. Today, only about 10 Thunderbolts still fly, yet when one of these giants takes off at an air show, the ground trembles and the sky fills with that deep, metallic thunder that once ruled the air over Europe. The P-47 began as a joke on German radio and ended as a legend that outlived a generation of pilots. Its 8 machine guns didn't just tear through metal. They shattered the arrogance of its enemies. In the end, the skies belonged not to the sleek, nor to the agile, but to the strong too, the thunder that spoke, and never fell silent again.